injured as a result of other people's negligence for over 50 years here in South Florida. If you get injured as a result of somebody else's negligence, it can be a car accident, it can be a slip and fall, medical malpractice, negligent security. If somebody else's negligence caused an injury to either you or one of your loved ones, give us a call. Our phone number is on our page, our website is on our page, and our email addresses are on our page. Please give us a call for a free consultation. We'd love to help you. Let Zach and I protect your rights.
I feel like 2024 is going to be magical.
Hello and welcome to this edition of FOF Live presented by Burger and Hicks. As always, we are presented by Burger and Hicks. Check them out on their Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, everything. We'll have their number down below so you can contact them during our show. As we were by Eli Sussman, Isaac Gazoo, Kevin Barra, I'm Daniel Rodriguez, and our guest from today from Marlin City, Gianmarco Ronali. I hope I'm saying that, but Gianmarco, it's great to have you on.
Thank you very much. It's great to meet you guys.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get things started. Marlins last series against the Cleveland Guardians fell 2-1, including an 8-0 loss that second game. Kevin, I want you to lead us off from this game. What was your biggest takeaway from the Marlins losing 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think just it was a little bit of everything at one point. Bad defense in that last game. Jake Berger making that overthrow. I know he was hurt on that play. And then that led obviously to, I believe it was a 3-run homer that AJ Puck gave up. On that middle game, just weren't able to get to a soft tosser. Ben Lively, I believe he's now injured or he's now fine after another report. But yeah, bad pitching there by Rodri Munoz. Just didn't look very good. Wasn't able to control his stuff. And in that first game, really a little bit of everything you got, I know it was the bullpen kept up their good streak. I know that it was a 2-run shot at the start of the game by Weathers. He's now hurt on a 15-day IL, but good defense is really what made up for that game. Amazing throw by Dane Myers there to get the out at home plate, and eventually that set up Jazz with the RBI single. So it was a little bit of everything, kind of to what we've seen this year. So nothing really out of the ordinary aside from obviously Weathers going down with the injury and yeah, just again, bad defense. Bullpen really couldn't get it going, especially in that middle game with Declan Cronin. I believe they broke their scoreless streak that they had going on. And yeah, just not a good series. Very, very messy series for Miami, at least in the bottom 2 games of this series.
Yeah, not a good series for our narratives on our site, where really recently Alex Carver wrote about Declan Cronin singing his praises. And then I think on Sunday morning, Kevin writes about AJ Puck and how he's doing so well, getting reacclimated to the bullpen. And that was his as bad an appearance as he's had so far. But as you mentioned, not all his fault. So a little bit out of that. Yeah, I think that sums it up really well. This is a team that pretty quietly has now lost 4 series in a row after winning the previous 4 series in a row. So it just undoes some of the mildly exciting play that they had prior to that. Of course, we should mention this was all without Otto Lopez, and for what it's worth, it was without Tim Anderson. I don't know if that was good, bad, or one way or another.
Evens out.
Yeah, so it evens. I guess it cancels out, all things considered. As you mentioned, the big storyline has to be Ryan Weathers, because Weathers has been the most valuable starting pitcher they've had this year, and all of a sudden he's unavailable. And 15-day IL at a minimum. I would assume it's going to be a little bit more than that for his little finger issue. So now they have yet another void in the rotation. And probably they won the game that he had to leave, even though he only went into the 3rd inning. But yeah, it's going to be really hard to win games, because I think we've talked about it on our spaces on Sunday and even in other formats, that there's just not a clear next man up for this rotation at the moment, depending on where you feel Max Meyer is at right now. But that was a strong suit of this team for a decent chunk of the year, was the rotation. And now with Weathers out of it for a bit, once again, you got to say that this team is one of the very worst in baseball, unfortunately.
Yeah, just a lot of different things going on this series. We can go ahead and talk about the starting pitching, maybe some of the relievers that really didn't show up to what we maybe expect them to do against the Guardians. But Isaac, in this series, go ahead and talk to us about the starting pitching because it was really up and down going on this entire series. You know, starting off maybe a little bit hotter, but then really tailing in towards the end of the series.
Yeah, starting pitching wise, I think you got it. The best start was obviously Trevor, one of his better starts of the season. Granted, that's not saying much, but he did walk 4. But that's what I think the third game was really just a backbreaker of this series. Obviously, Saturday was completely uncompetitive, and Friday I felt like they were very fortunate to come out with that win. So there you were on Sunday with a chance to win the series, take the series against Cleveland, and Trevor gave you a pretty good outing. And then, as you guys mentioned, AJ Pop completely and utterly cost Miami the game on Sunday. So I thought that was a real backbreaker for the weekend. For the starting pitching, yeah, I mean, I don't think you could expect Roddery Munoz to come back and do as well as he did in Chicago in his first couple major league starts. So I thought that's sort of where we would have seen him performance-wise with Roddery. And then with Trevor, hey, I think if you get that pretty consistently for the rest of the year, you take that. And then you see what your plan is with him next year. But overall, I'd grade the starting pitching, with all things considered, C plus. But obviously, it's got to be better than that with this offense.
Yeah, and John Marco, the Marlins against the Guardians. This what you had maybe expected the Marlins to put out against the Guardians again, first in the division, one of the better teams in the AL at the entirety of the MLB. Is this really what you expected the Marlins to put out against a team like that, or maybe did they underperform for you, or maybe even overperform?
I think it's at par of what we've seen the whole season. They've shown glimpses of Friday. They had a great bullpen effort after Weathers got hurt. They came in and threw, I think it was 5 2/3 scoreless, 5 1/3 scoreless. And then you go to Saturday where everything seemed to crumble. Munoz couldn't find the strike zone. Sunday, Rogers held his own. He stayed up there. And then once the bullpen comes in, something were to happen. Berger makes an error. Next pitch, puck positives into left field. And then, I mean, Berger made up for somewhat with his homer off Klasa in the 9th, but too little too late. And the series started good and it goes downhill. And that's exactly how the season has gone so far.
Yeah, and for anyone who wants to jump on, were there any positives you saw? We mentioned Trevor Rogers having a decent start, compared to the rest of his starts to start the season. But were there any positives maybe on the offensive side? Again, they did lose 8-0 one game, so maybe nothing really there. But in the other games, were there any positives that you saw from the offense at all? Or is it just mainly nothing really going for the Marlins this entire series?
There's not a single positive out of those last 2 games of this series. It's just simple. It was horrible baseball at the end of the day, and that's how I'm going to put it. It's really disappointing. You're going up against Ben Lively. No offense to Ben Lively, but this guy is throwing mid 80s, upper 80s, low 90s. You should be able to get to this guy pretty easily, and they weren't able to do it. And Trevor Rogers was just not very good, despite giving up 1 run. He walked 4. And he's not very good. The sinker has not worked out for him. His fastball, he can't command it. The bullpen after ended up blowing it, but yeah, just no positives at all to take away from those bottom 2 games. Good defense in that first game, but aside from that, nothing else.
I think you're being a little bit harsh with Ben Lively. This is someone that's won his last 5 or 6 decisions, I think it is. He's a pretty good pitcher. But to answer Daniel's question, I think the one thing that was positive, they sent back down to AAA Jacksonville. I know we're going to get into that in a little bit, but one real negative was, I know we spoke about him privately, is Jesus Sanchez. I think he was 1 for 9 this series with a whole bunch of Ks and just not really good at bats against all this right-handed pitching. I think that's a real issue there after being somewhat hot going into this series. So I think that's also pretty disappointing to see.
One good thing to see, though, is as we've seen for the past close to 2 months now, is Tanner Scott is getting back to his 2023 ways, and he's unstoppable, basically, at this point. They threw him in the 8th inning. Dave Myers helped him out with that great throw. Then he came in the 9th. 2 huge Ks, got some weak contact, got in and out. He's been, I think it's scoreless since April 15th, if I'm not mistaken, around then.
Yeah.
He's been scoreless since then, and if you want to look at a positive, it's a positive until it hits July 31st, and he's no longer on this team.
Right.
Yeah, that scoreless streak, one of the longer ones in baseball. As Sean Miller brought up in the comments, the very final moment of the final game, Jake Berger hit what is his only home run at home this year. His only Lone Depot Park home run this entire season. I think a lot of people would have thought that would come a lot quicker into the season than this far into it. But with yeah, it was off of a manual Class A. It was off of a reliever. It just obviously was when you're down to your final out and down by 4 runs. That's not really a high leverage situation. So yeah, we'll continue to follow Berger, but Berger himself really hasn't fully taken off. That's been another part of this where there was a stretch where I think he had a good series at some point, but he is, as a run producer and as a slugger, he's still been underwhelming from that aspect of it. That was somebody they were really counting on entering this year, not just as a marketing guy, but they thought somebody that would be a really good all-around hitter just based on what he showed last year coming over from the trade deadline. So it's something that I'm still looking for with him, as trying to wrap your mind around who the real Jake Berger is, because all things considered, it's been a really short major league career for him, and there's just been some inconsistencies.
Yeah, just a lot of inconsistencies you could say for the entirety of maybe of the team this entire series. But we could continue on just from talking about this series. Not a lot of positives from the Marlins. We can move on and talk about the bigger news that came out as of late with Xavier Edwards getting optioned down to AAA for Tim Anderson. I believe a lot of people expected Xavier Edwards to stay on the team long term just because what he could do with his bat, and really has nothing else to prove at all. Maybe for some people in AAA. Kevin, you're our minor guy here. Talk to us, Xavier Edwards, your thoughts on him getting sent down to AAA, and maybe what else does he even have left to prove? I mentioned he has nothing. He's hitting 300, batting champ title there in AAA. What does he have left to do in AAA?
Man, he was on pace to win a second one, so just shows how good of a hitter he is and will be at the major league level. I mean, there's absolutely nothing else for this guy to prove down there. And I know there are Twitter comments saying prove it at shortstop. Come on, man, just let him work at it through the major league level. They're not going to win many more games. Just do it now. Let him work through this up here. Let him show the bat. And I know exit velos are one thing, but the Marlins had a guy, I want to say, like a month or two ago, and Luis Ariz, who didn't have crazy exit velos and was doing exactly what Xavier Edwards was doing in AAA. So, yeah, there's different ways they could have gone about this. They probably could have DFA'd Manuel Rivera, who has been really good at third base. That's been a huge help for them. But when your WRC plus is in the low 60s, it's not very favorable. And then you bring in, and I know our good buddy Craig Mish told us he'll probably stick around throughout the remainder of the season. But Tim Anderson, when you're putting up the highest K percentage of your career at 29%, and you've only walked 7 times this season, I mean, you have to ask yourself, what player do you really want on this team? And I think that would have been Xavier Edwards. It's unfortunate, really, because Xavier Edwards, I believe, had the lowest strikeout percentage in the International League last season, probably in all of minor league baseball, and just nothing else to prove down there. It's one of those cases where just you're wasting minor league options on this guy for no reason when you could be up here at the major league level. And when he really does struggle is when then you could send him down. He came up here last year. He was really good for the Marlins. Not great, but he was still good enough to show a good sample size of what he could do. And it was very impressive, honestly. And it's one of those guys that they've really hit on with a trade, and we're just not able to see it at the major league level, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that was the main point, is the minor league option waste, because you could have brought up Jonah Bride, and then meanwhile you didn't necessarily have to bring up Xavier Edwards. I wasn't too surprised when it was reported that he was going down with Tristan Gray. I don't know how expected that was, but I wasn't totally shocked. I think Tim Anderson, there is some value in keeping him. He doesn't need to play every day, but whatever. I think from what we've seen, you and I firsthand, Kevin, and from what's been reported, he's been really, really helpful in that clubhouse. People love him. The players love him a lot. So I do see some value there to a guy that can definitely play shortstop, even though if he's not hitting anything. I think you said it. The move was to, eventually get rid of Emmanuel Rivera. I'm not a huge fan of the player, so I did think that should have been the move. And yeah, Edwards, you got to see what you have. You got to see if you can play shortstop at Lone Depot Park. It really doesn't help you see how he does it at AAA. He has over 900 plate appearances at AAA level. He's If there was ever a time to experiment with him in the major leagues full time, it was 2024.
Yeah, there was one nice play he made.
Yeah,
That
there
was
was.
he hit the dive to his backhand, and it was a long throw. Arm strength. There's still just limitations with him, where it is notable that they're experimenting with him as a shortstop and letting him play in big league games because he did not do any of that last year. He made 0 appearances at short for the Marlins last year. It was mostly second base, and it was a little bit of center field early in the season. And the fact that they brought him up and were willing to play him at shortstop 3 straight days showed you some sort of change to the way that they value his defense and respect and think and give it some credibility. But there was that one nice play, and there were a couple others that just were not so nice, where you could just see there was an infield single where he struggled with the transfer. It wasn't an error on him, but it was a play that I think a lot of shortstops make. And there were several other plays on grounders. He turned some easy double plays, or others whenever there's a decent level of difficulty, the arm strength shows up as an issue. And he has spoken about really working on that, how it stems from an injury he had even before he came to the Marlins organization. But it's still, it hasn't been magically fixed. It's still a weakness in his game and something that separates him from a lot of major league caliber shortstops is he just does not throw the ball very hard or very accurately. I remember that other play on a grounder where he threw it across the field to Jake Berger, and it was originally called, I think it was originally called safe, and it went under review and it got overturned. But Berger had to stretch like 3 feet wide of the bag.
Yeah,
On a
he
relatively
barely
loose
touched the
play.
bag. You know?
Yeah, so that's what you need to. People are excited about him taking this step, and want to see. So yeah, it's just a question about whether you feel like he should be getting more of these reps to prove them one way or another, or like whether I think the more realistic view of it is he could develop as a shortstop in AAA in the meantime while they still have Tim Anderson around for the moment, despite his struggles. That part doesn't necessarily have to be worked in the majors. I do agree with Kevin and with basically everybody that offensively he's ready to be tested in the big leagues. He's had so much success at AAA. He needs to be tested against pitchers that throw the nastiest possible stuff, that give him the most challenging advanced scouting and have game plan against him. It's too easy for him in the minors for him to get the bat on the ball. He's not really learning anything if he can make contact with everything he's facing in AAA. It's only by, at this point, going to the majors that he gets challenged with guys that have the best stuff in the world that are trying to get you to chase outside the zone. And then we can see whether or not this really unique offensive profile can actually translate. So that's kind of where he's stuck in between, where he's ready to take the next step offensively. But defensively, he's still kind of a liability. And if he doesn't have a position that he's super comfortable with outside of second base, it's just hard to squeeze him in as the roster is currently constructed. So I get both sides of it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask John Marl his thoughts on the Xavier Edwards option. Maybe what would he be doing, and just in terms of Xavier Edwards, what else he has left to prove, and maybe when can you even expect him to come back up this season, if at all?
Piggyback on Eli, his offense, he has nothing to prove. He can hit in AAA, and his stints in the majors, he can hit. His final game of the series, he had a ground rule double off of a major league pitcher. He can hit. His defense struggles when he made that nice play. Although it was a great diving play, his throw to Berger was a complete one hop that Berger, who doesn't have much experience at first base, almost couldn't handle. And he's going to make his way back up here one way or the other, whether it's after the deadline, whether they somehow make a move and just cut ties on Anderson. But as Kevin was saying, Anderson has been great in the clubhouse. You even see it on social media and other factors like that, how Jazz and Nick Gordon and other players, I'm sure even Xavier Edwards and Vidal Brujan, they love Anderson. They celebrate with Anderson. He's a great leadership presence, but I don't know what they're holding on to with him. I'm sure maybe there's a way that they can fit Edwards on the roster now, 100%. Right. You can very easily cut ties with Emmanuel Rivera, who he isn't proving anything offensively. And if they view Edwards as a future piece somewhat in the offense, somewhat seeing if he can compete and provide something to them, then they should find a way to put him on the roster.
Yeah. Just to give you guys a peek at the active roster at the moment and how that moves around, could be moving Otto Lopez to more third base in place of Rivera and having Edwards play a lot at second base. And the thing with Tim Anderson is it's the same conversations that every single team has, every single fan base, I should say, about teams when they have a veteran that's underperforming. And it's just a question of it's a blurred line between how much intangible value they bring and whether it's worth the trouble of whether it's better to have them around versus getting rid of them when you owe them all the same money regardless. In his case, what really complicates it is just he's been so bad. Like, it's not just below replacement level, but by far the worst at his position in all of baseball. It's reached a point where there's just no path for him, for example, to like revive himself and be a trade asset. There's no matter what he does the next month and a half, it's not going to outdo how much he struggled over the last year and a half. So, like, if that's part of their thinking, that should not be part of their thinking at this point. Trying to recoup some prospect in return, because that's not going to happen just based on who he's been for a while. So they are holding on to him. It has to do more about his value being around the team and being a veteran presence. And I think there's a lot of evidence in baseball that no matter how non-competitive you are in a single season, it's important to have veterans around, especially ones that command respect just based on what they used to accomplish a few years ago. And TA, his resume is pretty incredible, and that's something that guys can take something from. So, so TA officially back in the lineup, coming back from bereavement list. We're still not exactly sure what in particular caused his absence right there, but sending our best wishes to him. And yeah, you never know like what might be weighing on somebody's minds behind the scenes, and maybe moving forward, there's something left in there that he can like dig down deep and actually translate onto the field moving forward in a way that we haven't seen so far this season.
As a Marlins,
yeah, go ahead.
As a Marlins fan and as a baseball fan, you want to see some production out of Anderson, because looking here, his past 700 plate appearances, he's hit one homer.
Yeah.
700 major league plate appearances for a guy who's a Silver Slugger, if I'm not mistaken. He has the Silver Slugger. He finished 7th in MVP voting in a 2020 shortened season, and he's a 2-time All-Star with very good defense, actually. And it's just incredible how everything has somehow sidetracked since the start of last season. And this is a side of Anderson that no one has ever seen. And the headline starting this season when he signed out of Miami and all these media coverage and all that was, can Tim Anderson return and feel somewhere better in a different environment? Can he produce something like what he's been producing in his past? And it's just, it hasn't translated onto this year, and it's just been a struggle so far.
Yeah, and just to address this comment, not only about Biggio, but other guys in this situation that get DFA'd by good teams, because it's also, I guess, this also applies to Garrett Cooper, who got DFA'd again today. I just, it's kind of a moot point, because these are all players that are, even if they have some club control beyond this year, these guys are, the Marlins are not going to invest more money in this current team considering the direction of the season. So somebody like Biggio, who's earning not a lot, but even if he's an upgrade for this year, I don't think you're going to see a team, and I don't think you see other teams in this position go out of their way to claim a guy that's owed $4.2 million this year. Is he better than probably Emmanuel Rivera? I think so. And certainly has a little bit more upside right there. It's just that's something you consider in the offseason when you're rearranging things, not in the middle of the year. Just when you're a team that's headed in this direction. So I can understand why there's curiosity about that, because especially if their control will be on this season. But I think you can, whenever you see somebody that's been around for a little while that gets DFA'd, whether it's him, whether it's Harold Ramirez, he's still in DFA limbo, but he's in the same boat. Or even if these guys are improvements over the current team, and even though they could potentially be pieces of next year, those are things that a rebuilding team looks at in the offseason, not in the middle of the year, just because of money that's owed to them. If they're any good, then there will be other teams trying to trade for them while they're in limbo. So yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think one thing before we head into the break, I think we have to talk about this. What came out with the Athletic and the anonymous player poll for 2024, at least to start this season. One release came out for the Marlins and for Jazz Chisholm Jr. named the most overrated player in baseball. Again, only 59 responses, so take what you can there. Maybe some people who are jealous about him being on MLB The Show and everything with Jazz, but it seems like a good amount of players feel like he is overrated. Eli, Kevin, John Franco, I'll let you three guys take this, or excuse me, John Marco. You three guys take this in terms of what you see on Jazz, and if this really is a fair vote for Jazz, because I don't believe he's the most overrated player in baseball, especially over guys like Anthony Rendon and other like that's probably the biggest one there. I believe Jazz is fairly rated, especially how he is right. But for you three, where do you guys see Jazz, and do you believe this is a fair assessment?
I think where they're coming from is in terms of how much publicity someone like Jazz getting. You're on the cover of MLB The Show. You're known as you're on all of these big public outlets doing all this. You go on this podcast and talk about how things were in the locker room, but you haven't played over 100 games in a very long time. And that's kind of, I think, the standpoint where the players are coming from. I don't agree that he's the most overrated player in baseball. I think there's other names to look at. I mean, obviously, you would have to sit down and take your time doing your research to see. But I kind of find it pretty funny Anthony Rendon's on here. I don't even know why. And then you look a little lower, Tim Anderson's on there. Again, don't really know why. He's coming off of one of the worst seasons of his career, and he's once again doing the same thing this year. So, yeah, I mean, I get where the players are coming from. Maybe, the production isn't there for how popular you are, but, I mean, the play on the field has been a lot better this season. But, yeah, I mean, I could see where the players are coming from with this standpoint.
I just had some context to this. The overall survey had about twice as many players, and they could pick and choose which questions they answered. So about half of them weren't even comfortable answering the question or didn't have a clear idea about what it means to be overrated. This is a total of 10 players? No, 12. 12 out of the 59 that said Jazz is overrated. And as far as I know, that one of the teams involved was not the Marlins. The Athletic said they spoke to 18 different teams. Those are the ones that they actually have beat coverage for. And they don't do any coverage of the Marlins specifically. So I would venture an educated guess that they didn't even include Marlins players in here in order to potentially bring up the percentages of other guys involved in here. So highly unscientific right here. And I think that Sean put it best in the comments that Jazz thinks very highly of Jazz. Like he keeps saying he's been very consistent about what he sees his potential being and the expectations that he sets for himself. And to this point, he has not really come close to reaching his own public expectations, thinking that he could be one of the very best players in the league, that he could go 30-30 in a season or 40-40 in a season. And part of that has been health related as well. So yeah, it's kind of an impossible question to ask because it just depends on who you think is doing the rating. And I think a lot of this just comes back to MLB The Show. Even though that selection had really nothing to do, wasn't a popular vote. And Jazz, it's not like he had the power to put himself on the cover, but he was one of the least accomplished players to ever be on the cover, considering just how early in his career and also how much time he had missed prior to 2023, that season when he was on the cover right there. But yeah, it's not his fault. It's not really in his control. The reason why they chose him for that is because he's a really marketable guy. So I think at the core, that's what this comes down to is guys that are really marketable, even if they doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with their production. Again, that's not his fault. That's actually just a strength of his in order to appeal to people and kind of transcend what actually happens on the field with his personality. That's why he's popular among Marlins fans themselves. And I think is why a lot of people are kind of conflicted about the idea that he might be a trade candidate this summer because people enjoy him. And he makes it more fun just because of his particular skill set and also what he does off the field. He makes these games a little bit more interesting, even if the team itself doesn't benefit much from it.
I
Told you,
feel
dude.
as a
Go ahead.
the way that people value the word overrated in terms of the way that us fans see it and the way that players see it. Because I'm sure a lot of the fans that aren't focused on the Marlins will call Jazz Chisholm overrated due to the amount of media coverage that he gets, especially during the postseason last year. Right before first pitch, they interviewed him and they asked him about what chain he was wearing, and he's like, "I'm an alien," because he has an alien chain on. And after the Marlins got absolutely annihilated by the Phillies in 2 games, all the comments were talking about how Jazz Chisholm said he was an alien and he didn't pick up one hit, or he picked up one hit in the postseason.
Yeah.
There's ways that fans see him that aren't part of the Marlins, and there's ways that the players see him. Personally, as Eli said, I think he personally puts too much into himself, and he has put a lot into himself that he has not yet accomplished. He has spoken many times about how he's going to stay on the field for 162 games. He has been having 4 full seasons now. He has yet to hit 162 games. And I think just goes off of his production on the field and his production so far that he's done in his short time in the big leagues.
I forgot about this tweet when he just, without any context, he just put 9 WAR, assuming that he meant that for a single season. We'll head into Flip Fish right here, as we always do, entering a new series against a new opponent, picking a former player who spent time with the Marlins and with the other team at some point during their careers. At this point, we've had a lot of opportunities to do Flip Fish for the Mets, of course, because in the same division, a lot of matchups every single year. Let's go right to it. So an outfielder, a lefty hitting outfielder who played from 2004 to 2019. Really good career right here. 47 WAR, 1,800 hits. And an
I know who it is.
Yes. A lot of power, decent amount of speed as well. Think it over during our break, and we'll come back on the other side to get you ready for this series, take the rest of your questions, and overall just bring you the rest of FOF Live presented by Berger and Hicks. So stick with us.
We have been representing people injured as a result of other people's negligence for over 50 years here in South Florida. If you get injured as a result of somebody else's negligence, it can be a car accident, it can be a slip and fall, medical malpractice, negligent security. If somebody else's negligence caused an injury to either you or one of your loved ones, give us a call. Our phone number is on our page, our website is on our page, and our email addresses are on our page. Please give us a call for a free consultation. We'd love to help you. Let Zach and I protect your rights.
Intern Nate got it. Curtis Granderson.
The Grandy man can.
All right. Eli, I think we're ready to go ahead and talk about this upcoming series against the Mets. Look at the lineups. I was looking at Curtis Granderson's grand old stats there in his career. But looking at these, the red, the blue, the Mets are coming off their London series. So maybe could be a little jet lag there. But again, who knows? But they are coming off the London series against the Phillies, if you want to put that into the headspace of what could possibly be happening for the Mets. Let's start off with the Marlins, then we'll get into the Mets. And I'm seeing a lot of red there. It's a former friend there with the Fish. But starting off, again, having Jazz leading off has been really well against Tyler McGill in his career. I believe he's hitting over 300, over 350 against him. So it could be a great spot for Jazz there to get it going and to show those people that he's not overrated at all. But for you four, looking at this Marlins lineup, we're going to have Otto Lopez come in. And again, Tim Anderson, his first start since getting off the behavement list. What do you foresee from this Marlins lineup? Anything at all? I know the bottom half is always a main talking point in streams, but what do you foresee?
What's that noise?
What noise?
Oh, it's from Daniel. Jesus. Yeah, with this lineup, I guess you see Otto Lopez and Tim Anderson back in that lineup. Again, same old Jesus Sanchez fifth. I do like really a lot Otto Lopez sitting right behind Jesus Sanchez. I know it's not exactly great protection, but I think that sort of says, hey, we got to hit the Sanchez. If not, Otto Lopez is going to at least put the ball in play. Josh Bell, they're just putting him third, seeing what sort of value they can get out of him. But it seems like the everyday normal lineup today. Nick Fortes, of course, catches his buddy Jesus Luzardo. This is Luzardo's first start while the Stanley Cup Finals are going on, so I'm sure he's got extra motivation perhaps today. But yeah, I don't remember if Luzardo has great numbers or atrocious numbers against the Mets. One of those two.
Well, remember his last start in Queens was that start that ended up being the whole tarp situation. And I believe
the sleeping. The tarp situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it was a good start, I remember correctly, because Miami
It
won.
was. He got. I think he passed Outlider, I believe, in some sort of category.
Yeah, he set the Marlins single season record for most strikeouts by a lefty.
Yeah.
Game, and he was awesome. He struck out 9 or 10 in that one, and ultimately they somehow lose that game on the technicality after the fact, because they never finished it right there. He also pitched against them earlier this year during the previous series when these teams met, and he pitched like 6 scoreless innings. So yeah, overall it's been more good than bad for him against the Mets in his career. Yeah, as you guys mentioned, Otto back in there. Overall, it's a very similar. I don't think they've used this exact lineup in this exact order before this year, but it's very similar to others they've used before. Jesus Sanchez continues to just like blind you in the eyes with all the red that just, for the most part, is not translating to good numbers in the big leagues. He had that hot stretch to begin the month, and then, as Isaac touched on before, he was coming off a pretty quiet series this past weekend against the Guardians. But I think they're doing the right thing by continuing to run him out there as much as possible and seeing what comes out of it.
Mm-hmm. I concur.
They're doing the right thing by keeping Sanchez in the 5-hole, but they send Edwards back down. So it's some positives and then just right back down to the negatives.
Yeah, I mean, something we should have asked Skip. Obviously this season, I think we all know the direction it's going. It's highly unlikely they make the postseason. What's the harm in letting Sanchez play every single day, including against left-handed pitching? Because I know for a fact they're going to sit him whenever they face a crafty lefty again. That's just going to be guaranteed. So I'm just curious, at what point do you want to just let the player improve on the major league's dime, at the cost of major league success, or do you just still prioritize winning as many ball games as possible? And so I would love to get the answer to that question. Next homestand, perhaps we will, but yeah, I mean, I think best case scenario for this team is to see what Sanchez can do against lefties, to see what Xavier Edwards can do at shortstop, 5 times a week. I guess it's still kind of early. It's still early June. So maybe you wait until post All-Star break, post trade deadline, and then you'll see those entire 2 months dedicated to that. But, why wait 2 months? Why not just do it now? It's not like anything's going to change from here through there. So that's just my opinion. But obviously there is some sort of pride effect. You don't want to just lose ball games and so early in the year and really lose 120 games. So maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah. So no one else has anything else to mention between this lineup from the Marlins are putting out there against the Mets before we get into the New York lineup again. Maybe little Jake Berger, Brian De La Cruz, DHing there. Nick Fortes catching. If no one else has anything, go ahead and talk about this Mets lineup and see what Jesus Luzardo has to go up against.
Well, we can talk about how bad the Mets have been. They are coming back from London. They played 2 against Philadelphia across the pond. They won that second game in pretty miraculous fashion with that double play ball. And so the pregame today, they sent down the DFA Thomas Nido to make room for Francisco Alvarez coming back. This is going to be his first game action since did he undergo surgery on that thumb, correct?
I think so.
Yeah. So Francisco Alvarez is back, and that's really great for the game of baseball. He hadn't gotten it going yet prior to the injury, and so hopefully now he has a good season. But yeah, other than that, old friend Starling Marte in there. But overall, Francisco Lindor has had a pretty poor season at the plate. The big guy there is Pete Alonso. So see what he does at the end of this year, whether he signs an extension or goes to free agency. But it's a very interesting time to be a Mets fan, I would have to say.
I mean, most notably, you have Jose Iglesias hitting there. He's going to get his revenge series against the Marlins.
And he's been hot.
He's been good, man. I mean, you would love to have him right now on the Marlins.
It irks me so much how well he's been swinging the bat. It's actually been incredible how well he's been hitting. Well, it's only been like 5 games, but still.
Yeah, just a quick reminder. I mean, for Marlins fans, they signed Iglesias and Yuli to minor league deals, and they chose they chose Yuli. He got off to a good start, but he is now in AAA Gwinnett with the Braves, and he's been there for a while. So 40-year-old Yuli Gurriel there, and Iglesias up here, and he's been really good for the Mets. I mean, Marlins would love to have him at shortstop, I think, right now, over you know who. So yeah, but,
Yeah, their highest batting average in the majors with a minimum of 20 plate appearances. Be kind about it. So who else do we have up there? Oh, Luis Ariz all the way down in 12, and then a lot of weirdos. Royce Lewis.
Doesn't that suck seeing Royce that 7 games, 24 plate appearances? It's horrible.
So, and yeah, he has been. I'm glad that he's back in the big leagues. It was very weird to me last year that he did not end up playing in the big leagues at all, even though he signed with the Padres after the Marlins. I don't know if they let him go or he kind of just asked out.
he opted out.
He kind of opted out. So we didn't wind up with the Padres, but they never actually called him up at any point during their year last year. So it's good to see him back because he is, he's kind of a polarizing guy where he's had this reputation as being an amazing defender, and the stats don't really back that up. They say he's all right. He gets a lot of hits, but he doesn't hit for any power. So he's somebody that has a role in the big leagues. I'm glad that he's found it somewhere right here, even with the team that has an everyday shortstop. That's the one thing that Lindor, for the most part, has lived up to when it comes to his contract. Is at least he's available to play. He's played almost every single game each of the last couple of years, and this year it's been more of the same, where he's available at least. He's been a chronically slow starter, so that's nothing new this year that his overall stats are down, but he has been progressively better since then. And I enjoy watching him defensively just because the Marlins the last couple of years have not had great defensive shortstops themselves. And Lindor just reminds you, even seemingly easy plays, I think more so than any other shortstop in baseball, he makes the really challenging plays look easy with his combination of fluidity and arm strength and the way how he's just a really awesome defender, if nothing else. And, overall, it's a good player to have. If you can afford to pay him $30-something million a year, it's just comforting knowing that he's really the only guy on this Mets team. Maybe him and Brandon Nimmo. Those are the two and maybe Francisco Alvarez too. But there's a lot of other trade candidates on that roster, which makes them. That's ultimately the setting behind this. Is they're not as bad as the Mets. They're not as bad as the Marlins, but the Mets are trending towards being sellers at this deadline, and they have a lot of high-profile guys that are no doubt going to command a lot of attention.
Don't forget they're sitting Jeff McNeil against the lefty Luzardo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's not having a particularly good year himself.
Not very rough for Mr. McNeil. And just overall the Mets in general, we can also go ahead and talk about the other pitching matchups we're going to see this series. We're going to see Braxton Garrett. We're going to see Luis Severino. What are you guys seeing on the other guys on the Marlins? Obviously, Jesus Luzardo tonight. But what do you guys expect from Brax? And maybe we can even mention Roddy Munoz, but maybe more so on Braxton Garrett against the Mets. How he's been so far the last couple games, a little bit up and down ever since that complete game shutout. But with Brax, how do you have to fare him against the New York Mets?
I think this is the team that got to him, and I think this is when he told Isaac that he stunk against the Mets. But yeah, I mean, it'll be a good opportunity for him to bounce back. He's been all right these last couple of starts since the Maddox, so we'll see. And then Roddy Munoz is a good opportunity to really bounce back. It's probably one of the weaker teams he'll face in terms of, I guess, the ones he's already faced. He faced the Dodgers and the Guardians, two really good teams in there, and then he'll have a good opportunity against a Mets team that's been all right, to say the least.
Yeah, I'm excited to see him in person. I will be there.
Oh yeah.
See the series finale, Rodry Munoz and Luis Severino. Severino has been like one of the few bright spots on this Mets team. He was coming off that really bizarre, awful season with the Yankees last year, and people were even surprised that he got $13 million guaranteed when he was so ineffective last year. But this was the reason why, because he still has incredible stuff. And he has been at times one of the very best pitchers in baseball. This year, he's like a solid number 2 sort of guy. And he's they'll certainly have the advantage in that final game, the Mets will, with Munoz, because you just don't know what you're getting. His first 2 starts of his career were both awesome against relatively weak competition, then facing tougher lineups the last 2 times against the Dodgers and then the Guardians. he's been pretty bad, where it just his command is so inconsistent. It's hard to really wrap your mind around how a guy can, in one moment, dot his sinker so well at 96 and get all these looking strikeouts against the Cubs and against the Rockies, and how it looks so much different when he just faces a tougher lineup.
Yeah,
He has pretty good stuff. His stuff isn't bad in terms of Munoz. His stuff isn't bad at all. I think he overuses that sinker. And like last game against the Guardians, he couldn't locate that sinker to save his life. That sinker was on and off, inconsistent. Looked pretty good. And then I think he threw Ramirez slider cutter, and it absolutely got sent to right. So
yeah. We mentioned the pitching. I want to go ahead and talk about the bullpen because John Marco brought up a great point about Tanner Scott and how great he's been as of late. But when you look at maybe some of the other pitchers in the bullpen, very rocky outings for them. You could talk about someone like AJ Puck, like Andrew Nardi, guys who have maybe not played maybe what we thought they would be doing this season, especially those two guys. When you guys look at the bullpen, especially this series, what guys really have to focus or maybe your attention to? Who are guys you're looking at? Obviously, AJ Puck, Andrew Nardi. Are there some other players or maybe one of those two guys that you're looking at for this series?
JT Chargois, the guy who's not even in the bullpen for the moment, but is traveling with the team. And I would guess that he's going to get reinstated from the IL tomorrow after having the longest rehab assignment ever. Spending 3 weeks in Jacksonville. I should say the longest rehab assignment for a guy that was actually doing really well in rehab. He pitched 10 scoreless innings over 8 different appearances. And he's in all likelihood going to come back once he's completely rested tomorrow. And so it'll be a choice between Emmanuel Ramirez and Huascar Brazaban. I think those would be the two most susceptible guys to get sent down. But it's not a super sexy process, but with Chargois, he's out of options. He's coming back, and he's the guy that at times last year looks like a really great reliever to help them out right here. Throughout the season, there just hasn't been a single right-handed reliever that I unconditionally trust. I mean, for the most part, Declan Cronin's been great for the most part, but now just he's in a moment coming off that Guardian series where that was the outing of the season right there. Unfortunately, Anthony Bender just has not been the same guy that he was before his injury, and I think for whatever reason, the team is still banking on something clicking there, and something could click eventually. But for the moment, he is a little bit miscast as a guy that's pitching kind of high leverage innings. So I'm curious to see what happens when Chargois comes back. And other than that, Nardi it's just a reminder that why teams in the Marlins situation should be encouraged to trade relievers when they're hot, because it's so difficult to project what's going to happen to these guys next year. Like Tanner Scott is one of these outliers who is putting together back-to-back awesome seasons. There's so few guys like that. Most of them are like Andrew Nardi, where one year everything clicks and he's a great setup guy, and then the next year a combination of some bad luck, maybe a little bit of fatigue as well, and he's just not as dominant anymore. So that's just the reality of it. And that is, for the most part, though, like each of these guys have some level of appeal. And I think depending on who is performing best over the next month and a half, those are the guys that will bring back something interesting in return. I should note PJ reminds us that Brian Hoeing is on the mend, but that's still several weeks away. Although we did get an update that he's going to start a rehab assignment on Friday in Jupiter. So maybe 2 weeks away from Brian Hoeing squeezing into this mix as well.
Yeah, and with these guys in the bullpen, I think we could just talk about maybe a couple more guys there in the bullpen. I just want to mention maybe with AJ Puck. Kevin, really quickly with AJ Puck, what have you seen from him as of late? I know he got off to maybe a pretty rocky start when he came back from being a starter down to a reliever. Had a decent couple outings against the Guardians, and maybe what do you expect from him maybe now for the rest of the season? Maybe in terms of leverage, and what would you like to see from AJ Puck for him to turn it around and get back that confidence?
They didn't have decent couple outings against the Guardians. They gave up a 3-run homer to lose the game.
No, the one.
But
one, yeah.
yeah, I mean, he's been all right. I mean, he changes his arm slot again back to what he used to do. Like he mentioned that maybe that may have been the big reason why just starting back at the major leagues didn't work, and it was really just forcing something that his body didn't want to do. And I mean, we'll see what happens. I think he's still an all right player. I know right now JJ Blade is proving that Oakland got the better end of the deal, but
2-war player.
2-war player at the moment probably could be. I'm not sure how that team's looking right now, but maybe the lone representative for them, the All-Star game potentially.
Brent Rooker, give it to Brent
Rooker.
All right, there we go.
Oh, back to back.
Oakland will have multiple. Oakland's going to have multiple.
Yeah, back-to-back lone representative for the Oakland A's there, but yeah, I mean it'll just come with time for Puck just to keep it up. I mean he was doing really well. He hadn't allowed a single hit in his last 4 appearances leading up to that Sunday appearance he made. So I mean there's still reason I think he could be pretty good for the Marlins. He's a fine reliever. I think. I know the stats would say otherwise, but there's reason to believe that since going back to the bullpen, he's been really good, and the stats showed him 2.5 ERA. Obviously went up a little higher than that after the home run, but he's all right. I mean, he'll be fine.
Yeah. And we can wrap this up with John Marco before we get into our prediction time. We can go a little bit lengthily into that. But John Marco, again, with the bullpen, do you have any confidence, or I should say, what is your confidence level like with these pitchers currently in the bullpen? I know Tanner Scott has been rumored to be traded. So really with this bullpen, what are you looking at? What's your confidence level at? What do you want to see? I know we just mentioned PJ right there talking about Nardi's ERA in May. What are you looking at for here?
I'm sure Skip is just looking for anyone who's going to go out and throw him somewhat meaningful innings, because they've struggled all season to get any meaningful innings from their starters. And Skip has been having to plug and place basically anyone he can to throw innings. Thankfully, in that Guardians first game, Ramirez came up clutch and absolutely pitched great and kept them in a spot to win. But I'm sure when Hoeing comes back and Chargois possibly tomorrow, I'm sure you'll see Braulzovon and Ramirez both off the active roster pretty soon. They're basically just seeing what they can do. They have full confidence. Scott and Nardi, as mentioned in the comments, probably goes by how the team goes. And as you can see, Nardi pitches basically off of a lot of adrenaline. And if stuff is going right for the team, Nardi's going to be in there. If stuff is scuffling for the team, you might not see the best out of Nardi. Puck played good against the Guardians that final game, although the 3-run homer, Berger had that error. It was a hard hit, but it's plays that you want to see being made. And let's see if Cronin can start a new scoreless streak and see how long that one will last.
All right. I think, Eli, if no one has anything else to mention, I know we're eagerly trying to watch this Mets series coming up in a couple minutes, but I think it's a good time, prediction time, unless you have anything to bring up.
Let's do it. This is prediction time.
I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I'm really good at this.
Predictions.
Every time I see Gabe Kapler, I just think his TikToks. I can't stop. Whistling into the camera, which is my favorite one.
So here is a look at our leaderboard right here. Daniel Rodriguez still in a tie.
How the fuck did I fall all the way to 5th or 6th? That's horse hockey.
Isaac in a tie for 6th. Where's Kevin? Kevin in 12th, tied for 11th. I'm in 10th. Right here, it's between us and our super subs. We always encourage people either in our Marlins Discord channel or by going to FishOnFirst.com. You can enter your series predictions there before first pitch of every series. Consider supporting us, FishOnFirst.com/subscriptions throughout the entire season. I do have some predictions from super subs that I saw before we went on screen right here. And it was pretty evenly split between Mets and Marlins predictions right here. And yeah, it was pretty spread out across the board right here. Which is I think in the last couple of series, we have not really had our finger. Nobody has really had their finger on the pulse of the actual MVP. We've had to go down the list of guys that were actually good in the series. I should say the popular picks have not really delivered very much in recent weeks. So in this case, there doesn't seem to be a consensus pick. Just could go in a lot of different directions right here. So yeah, 3-game series.
No sweeps. Oh, one sweep. There it is.
Yeah, just one sweep right there.
Does win probability added include like defensive value? Like if you make a game saving play on the field, does that help your win WPA or no?
No. That'd be a manual adjustment on my part. If it's the guys are essentially tied, and it's like a common sense adjustment. If somebody goes all Dane Myers,
Right.
Game
after,
like, okay.
Yeah,
Because,
then I can make a manual adjustment, but that's not incorporated in here.
That's what I thought. Okay.
All right, Eli. I think you might have a video from Kevin and I for
No.
predictions.
There's no video.
Let's redo it
No
fresh.
video?
Let's redo it
Oh.
fresh right here in front of everybody else.
That's boring.
Wherever you want to go here.
Oh,
I will take Marlins 2 out of 3, and my MVP will be Josh Bell.
all right. Let's go with Eli.
Ooh.
I have the Mets winning 2 out of 3 right here. Once again, a lot of close games. But yeah, Mets slight edge. I think the difference maker is going to be former Marlins Starling Marte. He's in a weird phase of his career where not so great defensively, not so reliable in terms of durability, but he can still rake, especially against lefty starters, and I think he will during this series.
He's been hot.
And hot.
Isaac.
I believe that the Mets will win 2 out of 3, unfortunately, and I'm going to give the MVP to left-hander David Peterson.
Ooh. All right, nice one. I'll go. For the had the video, this is what I've done. Prediction: Mets take 2 out of 3. Francisco Lindor MVP. John Marco.
I as well have the Mets taking 2 out of 3, and the MVP of the series will be Brandon Nimmo.
Ooh.
Ooh. Nice one. Nice one. All right, that's gonna do it for us.
Haters.
All right.
Sure is, Devin.
There's certain episodes where I'll go out of my way to see it, but don't tell him that. Don't let David Sampson know he's doing a good job.
All right, I think that's gonna do it for this episode. Episode of our stream, FOF Live, presented by Burger and Hicks. As always, you can check out Burger and Hicks. You can have the number below. Check out their website, their Twitter, even their TikTok to watch that beautiful video from Mr. Burger. As always, for Daniel, Eli, Isaac, Kevin, Gianmarco, go Fish.